All right. We are live on YouTube right now. I don't know if anyone is joining us right off the bat here or if we'll have anyone today, but there'll be a replay for those of you that didn't catch it live. If you are watching live, go ahead and say hi so we know you're here and ask questions along the way. And if I can't answer them or comment on them as we go along, then we'll make sure we hit everything at the end. So after saying all that, hi, Michelle.
Hi, Laura.
I am really excited to have you here with me today. And you and I met several years ago in now Palm Springs, Palm Desert. I never remember which is which. I was out there somewhere. Okay. So I was out there for a conference hosted by Umbrella Ministries, and it was for grieving moms. And I went out with a friend who's become a dear friend. She's been here and she has been on my podcast, and a lot of my regulars of GPS Hope are familiar with Lynn Breeden. And Lynn is the one that introduced me to Umbrella Ministries, and we flew out together and went to this conference, which is where I met Michelle. And since that time, we have been in contact with each other here and there. And then this past November, I had the blessing, we had the Hope Mobile, and we just happened to be in Texas within an hour. I think it was like 30 minutes. We were staying of where there was an Umbrella Ministry weekend retreat. And so I was blessed to go to that. And Michelle and I reconnected there. And then as the Hope Mobile continued, we were out in California, and I had the blessing of speaking at a monthly Umbrella Ministry meeting. So we have continued to intertwine since that first time we met.
Thank God for the Hope Mobile, huh?
Yeah. Yes. Now, Michelle, I'm going to ask you just to start out by telling us your story about how you became a bereaved mom, please.
Well, in 1997, my husband and I had just relocated to Palm Desert from where we raised our kids in Hemet. And life was really going well for us. My husband finally got a job with retirement and health insurance. And both of my daughters, my oldest daughter was 19, my youngest daughter was 17. And we had just sent her off after graduation to Hume Lake Christian Camp, which is up in the Sequoia National Park. And it is just the most beautiful place there is. And it was my youngest daughter's favorite place. And so life was good. We were minding our own business, happy as a lark. And on July 2nd at about 3:30 in the morning, we got a phone call in. And of course, 3:30 in the morning, those phone calls are never going to be good. And it was a call that said that our daughter was being airlifted off the mountain down into the valley in Fresno. And we lived about 6 hours away. So we had to make our way up to the hospital. And when we walked in, we had been told that she had had 2 brain aneurysms that both blew at the same time. And so she was on life support. And when I walked in, I remember just looking at her. We could see part of her eyes, and I could just tell that she was no longer with us. And for anyone that has walked in and seen that, it's just even hard to comprehend. And I know that whole day, we had her on life support most of the day, trying to get family and friends to be able to come up and say goodbye. And we were trying to get my parents, who were on a road trip, so they could come and see her also. I wanted to be in the room with her. I would get in the room, I would look at her, and I just could not stay there. I would leave, I'd be out there for a couple of minutes, go back in, and I did that all day long, in and out, in and out. And at about 11 o'clock that night, the doctors came and had a meeting with us, and they told us that even though she was on life support, her body was shutting down on its own. It was just working hard and it couldn't keep going. The one thing I'm so thankful for is I've always been an organ donor fan. And so we made the decision to donate her some of her organs. And I am so thankful that we got to do that. It was just, you know, we talk about good that can come out of bad. And that was one of the good things that we were able to do. So I'm so thankful we got to do that. But that's where our journey started. That's
So
where I
she
found myself. Go ahead.
Yeah, so she had two brain aneurysms. I mean, at 3 in the morning, what was the what caused someone to know something was wrong, or what exactly do you know?
She was in a room with the campers, her fellow campers, and she just woke up and told one of her real good friends that something's wrong. I'm just got a terrible headache. And so they have a doctor on staff up there, and they went and got her pastor and the doctor that was on staff, and they came, and she couldn't walk. So they picked her up and put her in the car and took her to the infirmary. And she really passed away there. But they got her into the helicopter. They were able to get her body going, but of course her brain was already gone.
Yeah. You talking about her being able to donate her organs. This is off topic, but that just made me think that would be an awesome podcast to talk about parents and the organ donation, and how that has changed lives and how that's kept your child alive in some ways. Have you felt that way? I mean, have you gotten to meet some of the recipients?
Well, and I was so hoping, she had beautiful eyes, and I was so hoping that that would be something that, you don't know what they can use, but they do let you know later on. And once there's a brain injury, they can't do anything as far as the eyes go. But I kept thinking, not at first, because of course you're just shocked, but later on I was thinking it was so wonderful to be able to look in her eyes again. But that didn't happen. But they were able to save a lot of things that helped people, like people that had been burned, or other things like that. So it did do my heart well. And we do have a mom that's with Umbrella Ministries that is a big proponent of organ donation.
Okay.
So he would probably be someone that would be very good for you to talk to.
Okay, we'll have to connect.
Well, another thing about Hume Lake, it was my daughter's favorite place. She loved that place. It is where she first accepted the Lord. And so I just imagined this was the second place that he met with her and took her by the hand and took her to heaven. And so that gave me comfort also, just knowing that that was her favorite place and it's where she met the Lord. And actually, her accepting the Lord changed our whole family's dynamic because we're Christian. She was, my daughter, both of my daughters were, but we weren't. So it changed our lives. Changed our lives.
Yeah, we have that unusual blessing too. Rebecca received the Lord when she was barely 4 years old. She was in that 3-4 year. She was probably had just turned 4 maybe, and but right in that range. And she was in the hospital at University of Madison Hospital, taking her chemo treatments, and she had had her leg amputated. Here's this little 3-year-old girl going through chemo treatments, and she would be pulled around in a little red wagon and with her little IV pole hung onto it, and she couldn't walk at that point, and so she was immobile. And so we just walked the hospital, and one of her favorite places was to go see her, she'd call it her helicopter, because you could see the med flight helicopter from one of the places. And there was a little lobby area, and one time we just started talking about Jesus, and she wanted Jesus in her heart. She wanted to have that relationship. And so I prayed with her, and she received the Lord. And then it was like 26 years later, just a floor or two up in that same hospital is where she met the Lord face to face. So yeah, so it's interesting that we have a similar type of experience there. It's interesting. We all have things that bring us comfort within our child's death if we're
Mhm.
willing to see them, right?
Right, right, right. And it's
Yeah.
funny that you talk about your 4-year-old daughter going through what she went through. And it's funny how I believe we eventually become comfortable with our own stories, because I
Mm,
hear you say 4 years old, and I could not imagine having to walk through what you walked through, to see
mm-hmm.
a 4-year-old little girl and try to explain what's going on. So
Yeah.
I think as time goes on, it's almost like we get comfortable with our own stories. When you hear someone else's stories, it kind of takes your breath away.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I say this a lot, but it's like we hear someone else's story and it's like I can't imagine losing my child that way. I'm so sorry. It just
Right.
that's just the way it is. And in a sense, it's almost like it almost makes us count our blessing on my child didn't go that way. I mean, once again, it's one of those strange, can be a comforting thing when we allow those things to bring us comfort and we ask the Lord to show us those things. And it's interesting you talk about getting comfortable with our own story because it's a process and it takes a while. And we're going to be talking about having permission to live again, and
Mhm.
that's part of that journey of
Mhm.
becoming comfortable with your own story. And it doesn't mean that we're always going to be able to tell our story without the tears just crying or just I can't go there at all or whatever. But Michele, one reason I asked you to come and talk on this topic with me about it is because when I was in the retreat in Texas, you gave it was just a wonderful talk that I thought was very good, and felt like it would fit this topic. And it was about going hiking. And so
Mhm.
I asked you if you would come on and share the presentation, what you shared with us there, so that more people could hear that. So I'm just going to kind of turn this over to you and ask you to share with everyone what you shared there.
Okay. Okay. Well, like I said before, I walked out of that hospital on July 2nd, about probably midnight. And it was probably the second hardest thing I had to do, was to leave that hospital and leave my daughter there. And then I found myself where we all have found ourselves, in that valley of the shadow of death, that place of unfamiliarness, fear, doubt, pure anxiety, guilt, all those emotions that just come over us in that time when we're trying to wrap our brain about what we have just gone through. And I think Psalm 6, 6 through 7 just says it so best. And it says, I am worn out from groaning all night. I fled my bed with weeping and drenched my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow because of all my foes. And I cannot tell you, I never knew how many tears I could cry when I was in that valley of the shadow of death. And eventually, that shadow, living in that valley, almost became a place of, I don't want to say comfort, but a place of familiarity, because I felt I was closest to my daughter in that valley of the shadow of death. Um, but yet there were these sheer walls of guilt and anxiety and all of the fear that comes with death. But yet that's where I felt closest to my daughter. And it's just that weird place of, I had family and friends that just loved on us and comforted us and were there for us. We were so blessed that way. But yet it was this place of just sheer pain and just not being able to figure out how I was going to live my life forward without my daughter. I remember waking up after a month. We were at some friend's house, and I remember opening my eyes in the morning and going, it's been a month since I haven't seen my daughter. How am I going to do this the rest of my life? Not
Yeah.
realizing that further down the road, I would do the work. Of course, there's work to it. And I would do some of the healing that I needed to do. You know, that our pastor shared a story one time about two birds. And there were two birds who fly overhead looking for nourishment. And the vulture flies overhead searching the desolate land for dead carcass. Now the hummingbird, on the other hand, he searches overhead and looks for one of God's most beautiful creation, and that's the flower, which has sweet nectar. And they both found what they were looking for, but it just depended on where they put their focus. And in this time in the valley of the shadow of death, I think most of my focus was on the desolate land and the carcass. It seemed like that's where most of my focus was. That's what I was chewing on, the guilt, the anger, the fear, and all of that. When I was in that place, I remembered a family that lived in our neighborhood when I was growing up. And actually this family, one of the brothers ended up marrying my sister. And when my brother-in-law was 5, they just had a tragic thing happen to their 2-year-old son. And it was just tragic. Well, the mother ended up, and I'm not criticizing her, because this was 53 years ago when no one knew what to do for people that were grieving the loss of a child. They just made you buckle up and get through it. But she locked herself in her room for 2 years and never came out. And my brother-in-law was 5 years old. And so he had no one there to comfort him. And like I said, I'm not criticizing them. I understand it. There by the grace of God go I. It's just I was born at a time when we have more knowledge on grief and how to deal with it. Well, he has anger issues. And he told my sister, which breaks my heart still, when he gets angry and feels like no one is listening to him, it takes him back to being that 5-year-old little boy, and that no one's listening to him. And I have so much compassion for him because of that. I can only understand the fear and all of what he must have felt during that time. So that for me was kind of a motivation in a weird sort of way. His mom and him helped me in the morning get myself up out of bed. It was a weird motivation for me, because I kept thinking, if I stay in this bed, am I going to find myself in this bed 2 years later? And so it helped me motivate myself to get up. And then I watched my daughter, my oldest daughter, who would get up every day. She would go exercise. She would run. She would read her Bible. She would go to church. She was doing everything right. And so she was a good motivator for me too. Now, of course, later on, her world fell apart, but it wasn't for about 5 years later, which I think is very typical for older brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Right. They want to make sure their mom and dad are okay. So they're kind of watching over you. And then when she saw that we were moving ahead, then her world came crashing down, and it did. Now, I can't give you a time frame of when I was in that valley of the shadow of death, but I knew I had to give myself permission to live again. I had to give myself permission to laugh again and to find joy again, because I still had my husband and I had my daughter and I had family and friends who loved me, and I needed to find a purpose. What is the purpose for this? I can't just let this destroy us, because we have already been destroyed. I've got to figure out a way to give myself purpose. And so I just realized also too that I'm living my daughter's life too. My daughter that's not here, through me, I'm carrying on her life in my life. And I think that's so important for us to realize that we're not only finishing our story, we're finishing our child's story. And a friend of mine sent me this poem, and I just love this. And it's called Now That I'm Gone. So I can just only imagine our children saying this to us. Mom, now that I'm gone, remember me with a smile and laughter. And if you need to cry, cry with our family and friends who have walked in grief beside you. When you need me, put your arms around someone and give to them what you need to give to me. Look for me in the people I've known or loved or helped out in some special way. Let me live in your eyes as well as in your mind. You can love me the most by letting love live within the circle of your arms, embracing the lonely or frightened one. Love does not die. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away as best you can. I'll see you at home where I'll be waiting for you. And we all know where home is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of that, we always know that when we get to heaven, the Lord's going to say, what did you do with my son? And I just imagine, is my daughter going to be there and say, Mom, what did you do with your life after I left? I'm so excited to hear what you did. I know you probably did something wonderful with my life. And so I think we have to think of those things because heaven is real and they're there. So all of that stuff, I think, helps move you forward and gives you a purpose to let them live on and live a life that is worthwhile. So that all of that stuff kind of helped motivate me to want to live on. And like I said, for my daughter here and my husband. Now, the mountains for us played a big role in our lives and in our healing. We live in the desert. So my daughter died in July. It's about 110 here in the desert. It's hot. The mountains we can see from our backyard and they're beautiful. So for us, that was a place we would go often when we first were in our grief. It was just a place that we felt closest to the Lord. I think I walked through a lot of my grief in the vastness of the mountains, looking and searching for God there. And John Muir writes about that. He says, the mountains are calling me, and they're calling me because on the vast, calm, measureless mountain days, in whose light everything seems equally divine, it opens 1,000 windows to show us God. And I think that's what I saw when I was up in those mountains. I was looking through the vast windows that God was opening for me in my healing. And the Bible tells us in Psalm 121, Song of Ascent, I look to the mountains, where does my help come from? My help comes from the maker of heaven and earth. And so for me, and even for my husband, I think the mountains were where we received most of our healing and questions that we could ask. The peace and the serenity of the mountains shuts out all the other noise, computers, phones, TVs.
Mm-hmm.
So you are walking up that mountain with nothing going on but your mind. So that is where I could work out a lot of stuff that I was questioning. And believe me, I had a lot of questions and a lot of guilt. Sometimes I would get answers. Sometimes no, especially that question, why? Ask that question over and over and over. And finally, I remember, and it might have even been you, Laura, that said, you have to quit asking why. You need to ask how.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get through this? How am I going to come out the other side without destroying everything else in my life? So I finally realized that no matter what reason he had, if he came down and told me I took Katie because of this, I would say, you're God. Come on, you couldn't have come up with a better plan. Why
Right.
this? There's got to be a better plan. So I finally let that one go. And then I think Romans 8:28, the one that I think people say without realizing it's kind of hurtful. Even
Mm-hmm.
now I see, but then I was blind.
Right.
Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I remember thinking, really, Lord, what good can possibly come from this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I tell you, I could not list, and I'm not saying my daughter's death was good. I would never say that.
Right.
And the pain that I felt, but I have learned so much, and so much good has come out of this. So that's what he took something that was destructive and turned it into something good. So I think that's one of those verses I think we have to be very careful with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the processes, like we were talking about, one of the processes that you learn as you go on. So that for me, the mountains were a great help. The emotional pain I felt in these hikes to also coincide with the physical pain, because grief is physical. And it seemed when I was hiking, and I tell you, lots of times I would be hiking just with tears streaming down my face,
Yeah.
because it was a way for me to release not only the physical pain, but the emotional pain that I was in. And that helped me so much. I think physically, there's a way to help with our grief, getting out and walking. And I always say, even if you feel you can't get out of bed, maybe one day put your shoes on and just walk to the end of the driveway and walk back. Just get up and do something. It does help. The outdoors helps. I mean, they're telling us the coronavirus helps with the sun and the heat. So I think there's something to be said with grief too, getting outdoors and seeing all that God has created. So grief is physically exhausting and emotionally exhausting. And in this journey of getting out of the valley of the shadow of death and climbing up that mountain physically, I had to commit to do it. I had to commit to move my feet. I had to commit to get myself out of bed. The only thing I could do was do that, and I had to do it myself. People could walk alongside me, they could comfort me, they could do whatever they felt they could for me, but I had to be the one to physically do my climbing up that mountain, and I had to be the one to do the hard grief of my work, the work of my grief also. It seems the hardest part of grief you have to do on your own. Like I said, people can help you, but it's still yours to do. And you know, that journey, the journey up the mountain and the journey from grief is difficult. It's hard. And sometimes I wanted to quit. And sometimes I thought the grief would kill me. Not me doing anything to me, but just the pain that I felt like it would kill me. So how do you keep moving? How do you keep going? I find it's just that same thing. You take it moment by moment, step by step, little by little, minute by minute. You just hold on and keep moving. And sometimes you move back, but you're still moving.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, you're moving, and eventually you'll move forward. So anytime you're moving, you are moving forward. Even though you might feel like you're moving back, it's probably you're moving back because you're dealing with something that needs to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, we can't look, we just have to stay in the moment. You can't, because that's what I was doing. How am I going to live the rest of my life? Well, don't do that. Just look at today. Just look
Yeah.
where you are right now. Don't, even though I know we do, you know, we're a mother. We
Mm-hmm.
can't imagine. So when we do go hiking, when we do go hiking up those mountains, you have to bring supplies with you. You have to bring a backpack or something to help you, to put stuff in there that's going to help you, because you never know what nature's going to give you. There might be thunderstorms or rain, or you might run out of water. There's all kinds of things. So you have to be careful what you put in that backpack. And the lighter you make it, the easier it will be to get you up that mountain. And I think the same can be said for grief. You know, the lighter we make it, we can get up to that mountain so much easier. And so there's some things that you need to bring, some things you don't need to bring. And those things you need to leave behind. So it will help. It will help in your grief journey, and it will help in your hiking up the mountain. So some of the things that we deal with that are unnecessary, I think, are when we isolate ourselves, from God or from others. You know, I think we have to be very careful who we come in contact with. We know people who can hurt us, that say things that we don't like. So I think we need to be careful about isolating ourselves from them. But I think when we isolate ourselves from God and others, people that can help us, like say a support group or somewhere where you can get some help, it's important to do that. So if you're isolating yourself from God or from others, I think that sometimes we believe the spiritual lies that that Satan tries to tell us, that he was punishing you,
Yeah.
child, all of those things that we think Satan he's tricking us, and that's true. God loves us, and God loves
The deceiver, and he's good at it. We have to remember that, don't we?
Yeah, he's very good at it. Very good at it. Do you believe that God doesn't care about you? If God loved me, how could he do this to me? It just doesn't make sense. And I get that question because I remember I had a mom come to our support group that lost her second child, because I had a support group in my home, and she said, I can't love a God that would do that to me. I cannot love a God that would take two of my children. And that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to understand. It just is. So that is a process that you work through. But you can't just stay stuck. Got to work through. The other thing is that we sometimes feel angry. I think there's a difference to hold on to that anger, being not what they deserve. How do I explain that? Like if someone excuse them,
right,
getting the
consequences. There are no consequences. Yeah.
Actions. They still have to serve that.
And that forgiveness is for.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being from that person.
Right. Well, and I'm sure we still carry a lot of unforgiveness, and how that change who you are. So I think that's something that's very important, although that it's not something that's easy to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And probably revisiting it. Many alcohol and drugs that are not prescribed by your doctor that can get in our backpack and make our, she's doing all this stuff and look at her, but that's a way to avoid healing. If you're exercising like a fanatic, that's all you do, or you're shopping and spending money you don't have, all of those things can affect your grief, and you're going to have to pay for those consequences somewhere down the line. I remember when I went to my first support group, there was a lady there who was 17 years out, and she was right where I was, and I was just months out. She said, I didn't grieve, and I don't understand how you do that, but she said, I just didn't grieve. And now, 17 years later, her life is falling apart. So grief will wait for you. So you might as well hop in and get it done now, because it will wait for you for sure.
I think that's something maybe that we need to just kind of hang on for just a minute to think about that. What you just said, grief will wait for you. And it's, when you say that to me, I almost have that image of taking off a bandage. You can either do it, it's going to come off. I mean, it's going to come off. And wow, that's just so important to realize. You're going to have to go through the grief work at some point.
Right.
So the question is, do you want to do it now and work through it and take this rough road right now up the mountain? Or do you want to circle that mountain over and over and over again? 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, have to grieve start at the beginning. I mean, that's, yeah.
Well, and not only that, but probably in that time, that 17 years or whatever long you take going around that mountain, you're probably going to do a lot of other damage to things that wouldn't happen.
Yourself and other relationships. And
exactly. You're going to have more of a mess to clean up.
So in some ways, someone who's, because you and I talk to moms all the time. This is what we do, who have lost a child. And there are so many, like one of the things you said is, I thought the pain was going to kill me. I did not know how I was going to live through this. It just, I mean, and I do think we all feel that way. And so, for a mom to say, I can't do this, and to just veer off in another direction, to me, it's perspective is so important. And so to hear something like this, that it's okay in a sense that I'm in this place right now, and I don't have to feel like I need to figure out how to get out of this place.
Mhm.
Because if I figure out how to get out of this place so that I don't have to deal with it, it'll be waiting for me down the road. And so that perspective of it's okay to be in this place. We've been in this place. Others, thousands of others have been in this place, and you're better off doing the work now and feeling the pain now as much as you feel like, but I can't. We're here to tell you just 1 minute, one breath at a time, if that's where you are.
Right,
That it's
right.
okay. And where you are, it doesn't feel okay, but it is okay to be in that heavy, dark place of working through the grief.
Yeah. Well, and if you think, I mean, you've lost your child, why would you not be in that place?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
place are you going to be? You know,
Right,
that's where you're
right.
going to be. So, um, yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, and I always would say that just you have, you're given two choices. You're given a choice. Okay, do I go shopping or do I go for a walk? I don't have any money. Okay, I'll go for a walk. Even if you just make those simple, good choices along the way, and it's
Mhm.
kind of like what you would tell your kids.
Yeah.
You know, make good choices. Even in grief, we can make good choices, even though we're not
Sometimes making the hard choices now is what makes it easier later.
right.
If
Exactly.
we take the easy choice now, or what feels easier, I mean, there really aren't any easy choices per se, but if we take the one that feels easier, it'll numb us for a while, it'll help us forget the pain. Now that desensitizes us. If we take that easier choice now, it's going to be harder later.
Well, and too, in taking in doing that, you're closing yourself off to the rest of life. I think too.
Mhm.
You're closing yourself off. If you're closing yourself off to your grief, I think you're closing yourself up off to the rest of life.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you have to go through the darkness and the grief to learn how to live again.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
Exactly. And
Even though you feel like you don't want to.
well, who
I
does?
don't want to live without my child. I can't live without my child. It's like, I know we feel that way at the beginning, and we hear that all the time. Well, maybe you got to that point, but I won't.
Well, and
And
I just tell them that I was once where they were.
mhm,
I couldn't see past the darkness. And
yeah,
I think most of us that have walked through this will tell them. And
mhm,
and it's not like it doesn't go away. We carry that little hole in our heart the rest of our lives. I mean, I miss her every day.
mhm,
Every, but like I said, she's I'm finishing her life. She's here with me. She's walking with me through everything I do.
mhm,
She's not separate from me. She's still a part of me. When people ask you how many kids do you have, I remember the first time someone asked me that, and it was like, oh my gosh, I was like thrown. Whereas before it was such an easy thing to do, but eventually I figured out I've got two
mhm,
here. She's here with me. I'm carrying her with me. And I think if we think of it that way, they're cheering us on. Come on, mom, you can do
mhm,
this. You
mhm.
can do this. So
Yeah, and I guess that's one of those you were talking earlier about the motivation. I mean, that's one that can be a huge motivator, is I have to learn how to live again because I'm living for my child. I'm living for both of us now.
you're
And if I
writing
don't, who
your
else will?
right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure we've all heard people say, yeah, they've never been the same after they lost their child. They've never been the same. Well, hopefully, when they say that for us, they mean we've turned into these people that have a purpose and want a full life, not they've never been the same
Right.
because they've been bitter or angry or all that goes with that.
Hmm.
So I don't know, it's all those things I think that can help motivate you.
So what else was in that backpack that we shouldn't take? Anything else?
Oh yeah, the big one.
Oh,
Woulda, coulda, shouldas.
oh, the ones that torment us,
Yeah.
dig into us, and yeah.
And I did that for a long time because when my daughter was in 7th grade, she came and told me, you know, Mom, I think there's something wrong with me, because she kept having headaches. And so I took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know what, they're just migraines. She's healthy. She doesn't, you know, she's not slurring her words. She's not, you know, doesn't have her balance. She's athletic. You know, they're not going to do a CAT scan or whatever they're going to do on a healthy 17-year-old daughter, or 7th grade at the time. They're just not. So they gave her some Motrin, and we were on our merry way. So after this happened, you know, I beat myself up. I'm her mom. How could I have not known this? How could I let this go? How could I not, you know, make them do more tests? And I had to work through that. And eventually I came to the point that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time, which I think as moms, we all do. You know, if you knew your child was going to get an accident at night, you wouldn't have let them go.
Exactly.
We don't, you know, we don't know. We don't know what the future holds.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you earlier, you said something about feeling so guilty. And I'm thinking, what did she feel guilty about? Your daughter had an aneurysm. How can you possibly feel guilty about that? And yet, isn't it amazing? We find ways to feel guilty. And someone from the outside looking in would say, that's crazy. How could you possibly heap guilt on yourself for that? And yet that's what we do to ourselves.
We're moms and we're women. I think guilt is it's our go-to place.
Part of our default, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to work through that one. And I think probably most of us have to do that, you know? And I think that's it. You know, God tells us to cast all our cares on him. He tells us to. And so I think that's part of it. You know, you've got to cast all your cares on him. It's kind of like, you know, when people hike up Mount Everest, and it's the hardest mountain to climb, and they have Sherpas that take up all of their belongings and stuff because they're familiar with the mountain, they're familiar with the altitude, they're familiar with carrying all that stuff. And so I kind of think, use God as your Sherpa, you know, when you can't carry your stuff, let him carry it for you, because he tells us that, to cast all our cares on
Even
him.
if you're mad and you have to go, here, take it. I'm mad. I don't get it. I don't like you right now, but take it. You told me to give it to you. I'm not going to carry it. You're carrying it. You.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, but at least we're throwing it at him. I mean, lay it at his feet, throw it at him, just get rid of it and give it to him. However you have to do it.
Yeah. So I think that's you know, when we're in this grief, this is extreme conditions. We're in a place we have never been before, and so you know, give it to him. Let him have it, all of it. Like you said, even if it's anger, questioning, whatever it is, you know, give it to him. So.
That's funny, because even that phrase, let him have it, it's like you can let him have it or you can let him have it.
Well, and I'm sure both of us probably want to do a little bit of slapping now and then.
But it's okay. Either way, where you are, it doesn't matter where you are, you have to work through it. And the way you work through it is by keep going.
Right. Exactly.
Keep going.
Exactly.
You don't give up. And there may be moments and days where you feel like you're giving up and giving into the grief, but that's part of the healing process too, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's a major healing of every part of us. And part of healing is just resting and doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes for me, that's a hard place to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask my husband, he's right here. He knows I'm not one to, I'm always
Busy. Yeah. Gotta do something. Gotta do
That's
something.
preoccupation, but I think sometimes it is hard to be still.
Mm.
Those thoughts race, they race.
Right when you said that, be still, it's such a simple scripture. And yet when you really think about it, there's so much in there. That whole, we can be still, but are we, is it be still and know that I am God?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's the second part of that. And
right.
know that I am God.
Which when you've lost a child, knowing God at that point isn't probably not your favorite person at that particular point in time.
And yet
Even
it's amazing. Most of us would say there's something inside of us that's, we still know somehow we need him. We know that he's got the hope we need. We know we can't get through this without him. But why am I even in this place to have to
right.
to have to fight this fight?
Right, right. Well, and I remember thinking, when my kids were little and I would hear of someone that lost a child, I would think if that ever happened to me, you'd have to put me in a mental institution. I'd never be able to live through that. And look,
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think you're in a mental institution. It's awfully nice if you are. It's a pretty nice one.
my straitjacket when I'm done with you. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, I couldn't imagine it without him. I just, and even with him, it's not like it's a cakewalk either. It's not.
Mhm,
There's real stuff you have to deal with, whether
mhm,
you believe it or not believe that he's God. You know,
mhm. I
I
mean,
think
we still need him to be big enough to get us through this. Even if we're blaming him, even if we're angry at him because he wasn't big enough to stop this,
right.
we we still need him to be big enough to get us through it.
Well, and the funny thing is about stopping this. We all have our time when we're here for a certain amount of time. And I know, like I said with Katie, I question God, um, why this happened. And then my daughter had gone to my sister's house about maybe a month before this happened. Actually, she was living with them for a while because we had to relocate before school was out.
Mm,
So she stayed and lived with my sister. And my brother-in-law was a CHP officer at the time, California Highway Patrolman. And so he had just come home from a really bad accident. And it was a teenage kid that had been in the accident. And so my daughter had asked my brother-in-law, Uncle Danny, if he lived, would he have a normal life? And my brother-in-law said, Katie, I don't think so. If he lived, his life is going to be hooked up to machines. He's not going to have a quality of life. And she had said to him, Uncle Danny, and she was one that would get words mixed up. She
mm,
always would call something other than what it was. And so she said, Uncle Danny, if that happens to me, I'd rather be a couch potato than live.
mm,
And so on the way up to the hospital, I remember my husband telling me, remember, Katie didn't want to be a couch potato.
mm.
And so I think the Lord gave her the desire of her heart. She has different desires than I do. My desire would not be for, I would have probably taken her any way I could, although now further out, that's not true.
Mhm,
But that was her desire. She didn't want to live her life unless it could be a full life.
mhm,
So he took her desire and made it happen.
mhm.
So that gave me another comfort there too.
So Michelle, what do you tell moms and parents that really struggle with but if I let myself be happy, I just feel so guilty. I mean, my child is dead. What right do I have to live a full life? My child didn't get to live a full life.
But they are through you. And I think you've got to go back to asking them, when you see your child, would they be happy that you lived your life miserable?
I mean, in a sense, how would they feel knowing that they ruined your life?
Exactly.
They
Imagine
ruined your life by transferring to heaven before you.
and think of the guilt that puts on them, Not that they feel guilty in heaven, but it's
Yeah.
how they would want to see you live. And I think too, eventually, if we keep staying stuck in this place um, doing that, then eventually we need to go get some help to figure out, okay, how do I keep doing this? How do I get out of this place of being stuck? Because sometimes we do get stuck, and it's okay to ask for someone to help. There's nothing wrong with that. Because I think we do come to a point where, okay, I feel like I'm just stuck in this place. Then go talk to somebody. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody,
Yeah. And right now, especially, it's really more evident than ever that you don't even have to leave your home to talk to somebody. I mean, you can find online grief counselors and therapists who specifically are trained to help you get unstuck.
Yeah. Well, and even what you're doing, what a gift you are.
Well, that's the other thing is so many, it's like we don't need to be analyzed. We know what's wrong. We just need to be around people who get it and who will walk with us. And I think to me, sometimes the best thing you can do is I first time I went to a conference that Lynn was hosting, and Daisy was there, who founded Umbrella Ministries, for those who don't know. And I forced myself to go. I didn't want to go because I had not been in a support group. I hadn't been around other bereaved parents. And I thought, this was like 3 years into it. And it's like, I'm such a mess. I don't want to be with a whole bunch of people who are a mess like me. And I'm just going to feel worse than when I went. It's just going to be horrible and morbid. And the funny thing was how healing and awesome and relieving and wonderful it was to be in a room full of people who were a mess like me. it did just the opposite. And that was really what especially spurred me to say, I have got to figure out how to do this for other parents, because I really didn't have that right. I needed to be around other people who could help me get unstuck and walk with me, who had been there.
Well,
That's so important.
well, and the funny thing is, we think we're a mess, but really, as we work through it, I think realize we weren't a mess. We were grieving someone that we loved.
Yes.
And actually, I think it opens your eyes to a whole different world that people who haven't walked through this don't quite understand, because I didn't.
Right. Yeah.
So we really aren't a mess. We think we are, but we're probably right where we should be when we're grieving. It's not doing things destructive to ourselves and others.
Right.
That's when you've crossed the line, I think, in your grief. You're destroying others and yourself.
Yeah, that's good to call attention to that. Well, I was cleaning out some older emails, and I found one that you wrote from Umbrella Ministries that I still had in my inbox. And it's like, well, okay, Lord, now I know I was here because it was so good. And I'm just going to read just the beginning of it, and we'll kind of wrap things up as we tackle this thing right here. I don't know if tackle is the right word, but Psalm 84:11. You started out with the scripture, for the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk uprightly. Now, I know I'm going to go into a little bit what you said about this, but I just want to start out by calling attention. When we read that, no good thing will he withhold, that's a hard scripture when you've lost your child, isn't it?
It's very hard.
It's like, how could he possibly say that? But that's because we're looking through it through our own eyes of grief and not God's eyes of the big picture and eternity. We're so stuck here and what we can see, feel, touch on this earth that we forget that there's so much more beyond this. So you likened this. I love this. An egg is laid, which develops into a caterpillar. The next stage is a cocoon. In the stage of a cocoon, the caterpillar is being broken down and the adult insect is being formed. Even though this process looks as though it is just hanging by a thread and just surviving, there is a process going on. The cocoon is being spun and changed until it is ready to open up and be transformed into something that does not closely resemble what encased it. The result is a beautiful butterfly that spreads its wings and skates through the sky, drinking sap from all the colors that landscape the earth.
I forgot I even wrote that.
And your name is right on the bottom here. And you talk about that we're all doing the work of being transformed, but it's happening within, like that hanging by a thread and looks like we're barely surviving. And yet we're in this cocoon, which is actually a safe place. Mm-hmm. Where God just surrounds us with his love and his comfort and his peace within that pain, within that transformation that feels like, and we aren't the same.
No.
And like you said, the goal is to not look like the caterpillar, to come out looking like that beautiful butterfly, mm-hmm. in a freedom and a way of living that honors our child. We don't get stuck in the death of our child. We learn how to live in a way that honors the life of our child.
Right, exactly.
And that's what makes us so beautiful.
That's what I think you said it. We don't want to look at just their death. They were more than just that. Mm-hmm. More than just the death. They lived a whole life. Now, some people know, but that life mattered. That once we know we're a mom, when they're inside us, we've got plans for that child. That life matters. Mm-hmm. And we need to make their life matter. I mean, what a waste it would be if I just destroyed everything that Katie was, because that's what I would be doing. I would be destroying who she was, mm-hmm. by destroying.
That's a thought. That's a thought. Yeah.
So it's really, when it boils down to it, basically, it's all choices. It's all choices that we make. We choose to turn over all of this to the Lord. That's a choice to make. We choose to know that the Lord loves us. We choose to know that the Lord loved our child. We need to make that choice, that we cling to him. We need to choose that. It's not, I think probably in your grief, for some people, that would not be natural. Mm-hmm. Their natural would be to run as far away from this God as they can. Where really, if they would choose to run the other way, that's where their healing would begin.
Mm-hmm. And even just choose to continue the journey, choose the fact that maybe his answer isn't going to be enough for me here. It's not going to make sense to me here. And to choose that I'm going to do what I can to keep on this journey with him and mm-hmm. let him reveal these things to me that I need revealed to me, and be okay with what isn't revealed to me here and now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, and I'm sure you feel this way too. People always say, you're so strong, but I did not feel strong. Not even an inch did I feel strong. But I look back and I think we are courageous, because it takes courage to move forward and to live again. I think it takes courage to make that choice.
Mm-hmm. It does. And to feel like you want to live again.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you can, you can. I'm sure we both didn't think we could. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I remember waking up.
Even saying, God, I don't think I can make this choice, but help me to want to, help me to, make these hard choices now so that I can live again in a way that I can actually live again, a meaningful life with purpose again. Yeah. And I loved what you said in that poem. There was a line towards the end about, what are you going to do with my love? My love is still there with you.
Right.
What are you going to do with my love that's still there with you?
Right.
Mm.
And that's all like a motivation to live on for them and live on for the Lord, and to make this come out the other side, that it would be a beautiful butterfly, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. And we don't think it can happen, but it can.
Right.
It can. It can.
I think that of all the things, I was just talking to my daughter about that this morning, about if we would not, my husband and her and me, if we would not have gotten through this, all that we would have missed out in the last
Mm.
3 years that she's not been here, you know, what we would have missed out on, would be very sad. It would be
Mhm.
very sad, very
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. You, towards the end of what you wrote here, um, says the grief for now has encased them, but in God is in the process of transforming. And do you feel like you are just surviving? Just know that for now you are being set aside and you too are being transformed. One day you will not resemble this grief that has encased you. And Lord, we have your promise that you will not withhold any good thing from them that walk uprightly. We may be bent over in grief, but only you can lift us up.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And
We have, yeah. As I say, as we wrap this up, Connie hopped on and she says, why does everyone think they know what I should be doing? When I know my limitations, I still get so worn out, sleep late. Ugh, I hate this. And Connie, she is, I know you're less than, I can't remember, she just hit the 1 year or 2 year mark, but it's still really, really early, really early for Connie.
yeah, and 2 years, 2 years, you're still barely surviving.
Oh,
I have
yeah.
5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not. I think, you know, to think we're telling her what to do. It's. I think you learn from people who have walked through this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how you learn, and um, you know, you can take what we say or not. I
Mm-hmm.
guess. You know, I don't
And
know.
I think it's more people around her who have never lost a child. You know, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, and trying to fix us, who think they know how to fix us. And
Right.
I think, and I guess it's just kind of in some of our nature, we're just fixers, especially
Right.
as moms. We're just fixers. We want to help people. We want to fix them, and it's kind of like, well, unless you can bring my child back, you can't fix me.
Exactly.
But I think maybe even a nudge of, thanks for that thought. I know maybe you think I need to get out more, or, be with friends more, or go to church more, or whatever it is. But the people who have lost a child understand that I'm not at that place yet. So thank you for trying to help me. I understand, but I'm leaning more on the support from people who have been there,
Right.
and they tell me it's okay for me to rest and not do these things yet.
Right. And that's what you know, I
Two
think for
years. Okay, yeah, I was thinking 2 years. Her daughter Whitney. So yeah.
in like I said, 2 years is you're still in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're in it. And for people, and I think that's people put this thing on that a year out you should be like over this. And I remember when I was a year out thinking something was wrong with me because I don't feel any better.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I should be better. People tell me a year
Mm-hmm.
out be better.
Right.
Well, no.
But
No.
they're not people who have lost a child
No,
who are
no.
telling you that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. So you just go na 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 na. Not to them, but
Gotta take it with a grain of salt, listen or not, and then just kind of go, thank you. And
and it's okay if they're friends or even family members that you just need to distance yourself from, that just they're not being helpful, and they're not being helpful, and you needing to work through this. So yeah, sometimes it is amazing how relationships change.
Well, and I think they said that most people will only give you about 3 months to work through your grief. Then they want you back to where you were. It's like, oh yeah, well, that's not happening.
It's like good luck even in 3 years
Thank you.
when you've lost a child. Yeah. So, Michele, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. How can people connect with you? What's the best way?
Probably I'll give them my email.
Okay.
mpaulindio, Indio, INDIO, @yahoo.com.
Okay. And if people are interested, check out Umbrella Ministries. It's Umbrella Ministries, is it .org?
.com.
.com. Okay, umbrellaministries.com. So I will have both of those in the description below of this video so that you can check those links. And Umbrella Ministries, right now they've had to cancel a lot like everybody else, but they do weekend retreats for moms. They do one-day conferences, a lot on the West Coast, East Coast, Colorado, Texas.
One is still on.
Okay.
New Jersey one is still on, and that's in the end of September, I believe.
Okay.
So if they go to umbrellaministries.com and go under events, then they'll see the East Coast one in New Jersey.
Okay. And you can get on their email list. And I read a little bit of one of Michele's. There are 3 writers, and they come out every week. Same day Weekly Word of Hope comes out. And so they send out a lot of good stuff, just words of encouragement every week. So you might want to connect and get on their email list. And Michele is going to be with us again on Monday. And we're going to talk about grief triggers. Yep. So that'll be a good one. So what's that?
They're all over the place.
Yeah, we'll save that for Monday. So, and that's Memorial Day. I didn't even realize, boy, that hit early this year. So, but we'll be there, be together. Michele, would you pray over us for everyone watching now in the replay, please?
Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for Laura, dear Lord, and this ministry that she has to help all these moms during this time of quarantine and just a time of being stuck at home. Lord, I know you put her here for a time as this, so I thank you so much for that. And for all the moms and dads who are listening, I just pray for their healing, Lord. I pray for choices that they make. And Lord, I pray that they know that they have you to cast all their cares on, that you will walk them through the darkest of valleys and bring them to the mountaintop to soar for them and for their child. So Lord, keep us all safe. And we just thank you for all you have blessed us with. In Jesus' name, yes. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And Michele and I just want to reiterate that all of you watching, we give you permission to live a full life, to live again.
Yes,
so, all right.